Good morning, everybody. My name is Ali Board, and I am broadcasting live for you today from my studio down in Farm Studio. I'm very honoured to have been invited by Search Press Art and Crafts Books to share a live demonstration with you this morning. Now, I'm a little bit early. I'm just a little bit ahead of time, just because I thought I'd give us a few minutes to kind of grab a coffee, come and sit down and or get your materials ready if you're going to paint along. There's more to say about that later. It's lovely to have you here, and I have comments in front of me. So if you wanted to say hello or if you wanted to ask a question, then please do pop your question or your comment in that box, and either myself, if I have time, will get to it, or one of the lovely Search Press team who are there beavering away really hard in the background will try and answer it for you. I can see that people are arriving, which is lovely. Thank you very much indeed. And we are going to get to a painting today, which the inspiration of which comes from my long history of an association with dance and with ballet in particular. But I'll tell you more about that in a little while. I'm very proud to be a new author with Search Press. They invited me to write my first ever book, which is just the most exciting thing ever if you're an artist. And it got published earlier in the year. It's called A Beginner's Guide to Watercolour with Mixed Media, and I loved every single minute of its production. It was so much fun. So I'll share with you a little bit more about that in a second. I'm just going to have a look at the comments and see what's coming in. Good morning, Leanne. Good morning, Sharon. Good morning, Janice. You are all very welcome indeed. Good morning, everyone who is just saying hello. Thank you ever so much for tuning in. It means an awful lot, both to Search Press and to myself in these very unprecedented times. Good morning, Ale. Good morning, Marissa. Good morning, Gloria. You are all very welcome. Good morning, Connie. Thanks for putting your comments in, because it's a very odd scenario, the scenario that we're in, because obviously I am all alone at home in my studio, just broadcasting, talking to a camera. I'm very used to an audience ordinarily, and I'm very used to feedback. So it's nice to have people commenting, because it sort of feels like you're out there then. And if anybody does follow my social media, you will probably have seen that I have quite the bank of technology in front of me. Plus, I know some of you spotted when I shared a picture the other day that my camera that I am actually speaking to right now, I have a little post-it note underneath with a smiley face on, just to remind me to keep smiling and that you're there as well. Now, I am going to take you through a little bit of the technology and show you a few things just ahead of me starting to paint that I'm going to share with you. So we obviously can talk to each other one-to-one like this. Good morning all, if you are just tuning in. We also have what I call palette cam. So this is a shot of some of the materials that I'm going to be using this morning, and I'll take you through those in just a second. And we also have the overhead shot. So this is where my main painting is going to be taking place, and this is where you will see it constructed. And I just so happen, it's like it almost happened on purpose, isn't it? Here is my book, A Beginner's Guide to Watercolour with Mixed Media, and I can show you the things that we are going to be tackling today. One of the sections of my book does deal with wet media. And by that I mean using watercolour and introducing other things. So in this case we were talking about inks, and we're talking about things like gouache and other kinds of paints. But I also have a theme for this chapter of my book, and that was dancers and musicians. So you can see one of the paintings there. This was the picture that you probably saw in the advertisement for today. So this was the original painting that I did. I called this Tarantella, and I'll tell you more about my model in just a second. And I'm going to do a second version of this, a slightly different version, because this had collage and all sorts of things in it too. But we're going to share a few techniques, and we're going to kind of experiment and see how it goes. So I very much hope that if you're painting along, you manage to gather your materials. I am going to paint quite quickly, But don't forget that these videos, all of the videos that Search Press have been allowing their authors to share with you, are available on their videos tab. So after the event, if you missed the beginning, or if you'd like to put me on pause, because let's face it, who wouldn't, you can go back into the Search Press page and you can just click on the videos tab, and you will see there very clearly all of the videos myself and some of the crocheting tutors. Matt Palmer is there too, all sorts of things going on. So there's plenty for you to enjoy. So let's just talk very, very quickly about why dancers and why I'm particularly inspired by ballet dancers. So those of you who know me will probably know that I started my career out in dance. I'm a qualified ballet teacher, and I still have the honour of being able to do that even to this day. Even this afternoon, actually, I've got a couple of ballet classes to teach, although they're being done virtually at the moment, which is bizarre to say the least. But yes, I originally qualified to be a ballet teacher, and loved every minute of it, but became a little bit disillusioned with how competitive it was, and so kind of left it behind, moved more towards art through the encouragement of my parents. But it never leaves you, that kind of thing, that being able to stand on a stage or encouraging other people to stand on a stage is very addictive and very fulfilling. And so I return to dancers all the time. Not necessarily, I'm not really well known for painting dancers. It's not the thing I do. And one of the reasons that I don't paint dancers an awful lot is because I know what I'm looking for. I know what pose a dancer would hit. And so I become very picky about my subject matter. Now today I'll share with you the subject matter that I'm going to be working from. So this is the beautiful Naomi, who is a model for me. I've had the absolute honour of training her in her final years at dance school. And she is now at a performing arts school and doing very well, I have to say. And Naomi, I had the privilege of photographing on many occasions, and she'd pop costumes on for me. But this is a pose that really, really, really struck a chord with me, because she hasn't got her hair up in a traditional bun. She's got it kind of down and flowing, and her personality really seems to shine through. And so therefore, it's become a picture that I have used again and again, and I'm sure you will agree that she looks absolutely spectacular. Now, she is a ballet dancer. She has got pointe shoes on, and I have my very own pair of pointe shoes here. This was the last pair of pointe shoes that I actually ever owned. I think I only ever wore them for one rehearsal, but I will show you a painting that I did earlier in the week of pointe shoes, because it's very important to me that you understand the construction, not only of the shoes, but of the dancer and the movement and all of those kind of things. So we're going to do quite a little bit of detail at the start of our painting today. And then afterwards, we are really going to go to town with some inks and do all sorts of things. So without further ado, shall we get to the materials? Let's take you to palette cam. Oh, the technology's playing up. There we go. Here's palette cam. So I'm just going to go very quickly through the materials that I suggested that you have. Now, the success of your painting, if you're following along, does not stand and fall on you absolutely replicating these materials. It's just, these are the things that I have gathered together so that I can do it the way that I want to do it, but you might want to interpret it differently. So I have a couple of ceramic palettes. This one has still got the dregs of some other colours that I was using for pointe shoes earlier in the week. I will talk more about that in a second. I've got some watercolours here. I'm using the Daniel Smith watercolours from a tube squeezed out into a pan, and I've got three colours here. I've got a Jane's Grey, a Cobalt Turquoise and a Burnt Umber. Now again, it isn't imperative that you have exactly those colours, and it's certainly not imperative that you have that brand. A grey or a black would be absolutely fine. I just like turquoise in the background of my pictures, but you could use anything. You could use a pale blue or a pale lilac, something like that. And I've got the Burnt Umber more or less for the shadows on Naomi herself and for her hair. And then here are the kind of stars of the show today. These are going to be used for her dress and to create that kind of explosion of movement in the fabric. And I've got a combination here of acrylic inks and shellac based inks. So that's the De La Rowney FW ink. I've also got the Dr. P.H. Martin's Bombay inks, but again, it doesn't matter what inks you have. It doesn't even matter that you have ink. You could have thinned out watercolour or thinned out gouache or any of those kind of things. It's just because you want it in liquid form. And then another couple of things that I have got here, I've got some white gouache just in case I need to do a little bit of editing. I've got a selection of brushes here. These are the SAA Imitation Sable brushes. They are my favourite. Tape, water pot, spray bottle. I've got a hairdryer heat gun over on the other side. And this odd contraption. Now, I did put this on the equipment list, and if you are wondering where you can find the resources for today, including the line drawing and the photograph, if you go over to the event on the Search Press page, you will see that the resources were very kindly linked by the Search Press team into that. Now this is the weird bit. This is called a rubber dust blower. Now these are designed for blowing the dust out of picture frames, or for cleaning the lenses of cameras when you get a little bit of dust on there, or for clearing if you rub out and you've got little bits of rubber everywhere, for blowing them off the surface. Now, as you can imagine, we are going to be using it for moving paint on our surface. Now, it doesn't matter if you don't have one of these, you can of course use a straw. Just be careful if you are using a straw that you do have to blow quite hard, and I don't want anybody getting lightheaded on me. So that's just a roundup of the kit. In terms of other things that you're going to need the line drawing, unless you want to draw it freehand, of which I'm sure that you are very capable. A bit of trace down to get your line drawing onto your watercolour paper. Don't worry, I'm going to go through all of these things. Trace down to be able to do it, and a biro and all of that kind of stuff. If you have any questions at all about the materials, pop them in the comments. I will try to get to them during the demonstration, but if I don't, I promise I will go back through all of the comments after I've finished my painting, and I will try to answer them on a one-to-one basis. So my apologies if I don't get to them, or if the Search Press team aren't able to answer them on my behalf, because that's quite tricky, but I promise I will get back to them afterwards. If you're painting along, I am going to be quite speedy. I am going to go at the speed of light, but I'm sure that there are people out there who will actually quite enjoy that. And hey, it stops the faffing. And if you've read my book, you will know all about faffing. So should we get started? Let's take you to the overhead camera, and I will share with you a few things that I've got here just to show you to kind of lead up to the painting. So let's pop my book over to one side, and here is the line drawing and the trace down, which we're going to use in a minute. But I thought you might like to see a couple of other paintings as well. This one appears in my book. This is called On Point, and I'm sure you can very clearly see the shape of this shoe, this incredible tool that ballet dancers use to extend the line of their leg and their foot. If you are interested in doing a painting similar to this, and I will show you another one in just a second, then pop over to my Facebook page, and on that Facebook page you'll find a whole raft of videos that you can follow along. Now, what people don't know about point shoes is that they're completely hollow. They're made of something similar to papier-mâché, and they are really, really hard. really, really, really hard. So they are instruments of torture. If you ever have watched a ballet, you will see how beautiful and graceful the dancers are, and you can't quite believe how graceful they are when they have to wear these things on their feet. I'm very proud of my point shoes. I do keep them kind of nice and safe and special, but nothing is going to get me wearing these again, it has to be said. All credit to those dancers who spend a lifetime doing it. So there is the painting that made its way into the book. And here is the painting that I did earlier in the week. Just a sketch, more so than a complete painting, where I was talking about how the shoes are constructed and looking at using greys for underpainting and all of those kind of things. So there's plenty. If you're a real ballettomane like I am, there's plenty for you to enjoy as far as ballet is concerned. So without further ado, let's get cracking. So here is the line drawing. I'm working on Saunders Waterford watercolour paper today. It is my watercolour paper of choice. The success of your painting does not stand and fall on whether you have Saunders Waterford or not. My particular reasons for choosing it is that it's a cotton rich paper, and therefore I can be really horrible to it and it's going to stand up to the things that I'm asking for it. But you use whatever you have, and I'm sure that you'll come out with a really successful dancer. Now, one of the things you may have noticed about the line drawing, and if I just flag up that beautiful picture of Naomi again, you will see that there are some things that I left out. So I have left out her leg, which is hitched up underneath her, which is in a position called retire. And you will notice when I switch back to the line drawing in just a second that I have missed out her back arm. Now, let's just get you to the overhead shot so I can point those things out, and I will tell you why. Now, I've missed her knee and her foot out here because I am presuming by the time I go to town with the inks, they're going to be covered up. And I'm all for not having to paint too hard, so I don't really want to paint it in and then cover it up. And I have missed out this back arm. Now, it might look a bit odd that she's only got one arm showing, but if I take you back to that photograph again, you may notice that that arm actually looks a bit peculiar in the photograph anyway. It actually looks a bit like it's growing out the middle of her back. And I can do without those challenges in my painting, so I have left it out, and hopefully all of this is going to be covered by ink and splashes and all kinds of stuff going on. So I'm going to get this line drawing down onto my watercolour paper as quickly as I can, and to do that I'm going to use a trace down technique. So this is a way of making a shortcut. This is not cheating. Don't let anybody ever tell you this is cheating. I would take umbrage with people who say it's cheating. It is merely a shortcut. I've done the tough bit for you and I've done the line drawing, and you're just going to transfer it onto your watercolour paper. Now, you could put pencil all over the back of it if you wanted to, and then rub it in and then draw back over so you transfer, but I'm going to use trace down. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take a little bit of this stuff, framer's tape, and I'm just going to stick it to myself, not because I want to put the sticky on me, but so that I just knock back some of the stickiness of this tape. And then I will use that at the top of my line drawing. I've kind of, she's a bit skew with. Line it up, Ali. I am going to put her ever so slightly over to the right so that I've got a bit of space for her dress to go in. And I've got a bit of space at the bottom. And underneath that, I'm going to use this stuff, trace down. Now, I'm sure that there are lots of you out there that know of this product, but just in case you don't know of this product, it is a carbon paper of sorts. So you may remember old-fashioned carbon paper. I'm the daughter of a stationer, so I remember it very well. You used to get handwriting carbon and typing carbon. But the problem with both of those products, and you can still get them, is that they were wax-based. And then, of course, if you use that for your transfer, when you go to put watercolour over the top of it, it's going to repel the watercolour. So Trace Down, as you can see, is a wax-free tracing paper, and it's more like graphite. So we're going to pop it underneath our line drawing, and you just need to make sure that it is dark side down DSD, because otherwise you're going to have to do it twice. So let's lift up our line drawing, pop our trace down underneath, and then I'm actually going to use a biro to do my transfer. Now, again, you don't have to use a biro, you could go over with a pencil, but let me give you the two reasons as to why I'm using a biro. The first is when you start going over my line drawing, I personally think a biro presses a little bit harder, so that there you can see my lines are already coming through on my trace down. And you also may notice that this is not a brand spanking new piece of trace down. This is a piece I have used several times over. So I'm going to go back over. Now, the other reason that I use a biro, and I use a coloured biro in particular, is so that I can see where I've been. Otherwise, you get a bit lost. Now, today's line drawing isn't too complicated. It's not the simplest, but it's not the most complicated one I've ever done either. And I don't want to get halfway through and be lifting it up and putting it down. I can very clearly see on this how which lines I've gone over, where I am with the plan, all of those kind of things. And of course I've got a purple biro this morning because purple is just my favourite colour. So I've done that bit of her hair. Let's get her neck and this part of her hair in. And I'm going to very carefully work my way around her face. So I'm pressing quite hard, but also being very mindful that when I come to doing her features on her face, I don't want to overdo it. The emphasis is on her dress today, and I am no portrait painter. I am definitely not traditionally a figure painter or a portrait painter. This is just a means to an end to get my beautiful dancer down on my watercolour paper. Now, while I'm finishing this off, let me just double check that it's coming through. Okay, it is. Marvellous, marvellous, marvellous. You may be interested to know why I called this painting Tarantella. So Tarantella is a traditional Italian dance, usually done with a tambourine, very fast, very frenetic. And it was two reasons really why I called this Tarantella. The first being that the Tarantella was the last dance I helped Naomi with before she finished her student exams. And the second was, in order to make her look quite dynamic, to put that beautiful dress in on her and do all the things that we're going to do from an art point of view, it kind of shouted out that it was a red dress, that it was a bit of an explosion, all of those kind of things. So it named itself really. So down here I've got the line of her leg in. Let's get down to her calf, and I'm going to put a tiny bit of detail in for the ribbons that traditionally tie the shoe to the dancer's foot in a very complicated crossover pattern to make sure that it's very secure. And student dancers spend a long time learning how to do that and how tight to make their shoes so that their shoe is secure but that they're not cutting off their circulation. Admittedly, sometimes they would quite like to cut off their circulation if they're having a bad day and in a bit of pain. But you'll see every dancer for at least the last couple of 100 years has laced their shoes in this way. Now, if you've just joined us, good morning to everybody. Thank you very much for tuning in. My name is Ali Board, and we are doing a dancer painting today. If you've missed the start, don't worry, you can watch it on catch up. You can go back onto the Search Press page and you can click on the videos tab and you will see it there. It will be archived there after I have finished. But if you're watching live, you're very welcome. Thank you very much for joining me. It's an absolute honour to be doing this. So when you are happy that you have transferred your line drawing, very carefully peel that away. You'll see that because we stuck the tape to ourselves, it hasn't left any residue at all. And then I'm going to put my piece of trace down away nice and safely in the little folder over here. And then, of course, that line drawing can be saved for another day. And also, this is a fantastic way. Sometimes a lot of people say to me, oh, I've done a really nice line drawing, but if I'm really scared about doing the painting and I don't want to spoil it, well, copy it off. This is what I've done with this. This was a sketch which I have copied on my scanner, and I can print it out again and again and again and again. And then it doesn't matter really what the end result of this is because I haven't spoilt this and I can do it again if I want to. Next thing I'm going to do, good morning Laurie. Laurie is saying must be so painful on their toes. It's something that you get used to, I think, Laurie. I've done my time. I have no intention of doing it again. And I try to kid my current students that it doesn't hurt. But I think it's something that you just train for. You don't get the kids to do it too early because it can have a detrimental effect on their feet. Dancers' feet are not pretty things. But it's also to do with extending the line and really making the lines of ballet look elegant. And ballet is such an incredible discipline because it teaches all sorts of things, not just about ballet and about skill and perseverance and all of that kind of stuff. It also teaches the girls how to fight through things. When you're doing partnering and you're working with a male dancer, you're working with collaboration, you're doing all sorts of things. So they are absolutely skills for life. And everything that I have managed to achieve in my artistic career, I can absolutely put down to my ballet training. The performance element, the being organised element, all of that kind of stuff, I attribute all to my wonderful ballet teachers that I had when I was a kid. So you probably noticed I am just going back over this with a little bit of pencil. This is not necessarily because I need to fill it in anymore. This for me is more like a navigation technique, in that in my head I'm going, right, that's there and that's there and that goes there, and it is just a way of helping me out before I start painting. Now I can see from the comments a question has come in from Rosie. Good morning, Rosie. What size is the watercolour paper? Excellent question, Rosie. I forgot to say thank you very much for that. The size of the paper is 1/4 imperial, so that is around about 15 by 11 inches. But something, I mean, this line drawing that I had is A4. I've done it on a bigger piece of paper just so that I've got room for the skirt to fly out when we're done. But it doesn't really matter. Again, the success of your painting is not going to stand and fall on the size of your watercolour paper, I promise. If you've got a smaller piece, that's fine. If you've got a bigger piece, that's fine too. Now let's get those kind of beautiful bits, tendrils of Naomi's amazing hair in. Get those in. And just got her face to finish off. Somebody's saying hello from Australia. Leanne, good morning. Am I international today? How marvellous. Thank you very much. Thank you to everybody who is taking the time to tune in and join me this morning. It means an awful lot. Thank you. Right, let's get these facial features in. Now, like I say, Naomi's face is not the star of the show today. Her dress is. And so I'm not painting this in, I'm not drawing this in an enormous amount of detail. All I am doing is putting in enough so that it looks like her face, but because, like I said, I am no portrait artist, it means that her face is there and I can concentrate on all the rest of it. Now, poor Naomi, I don't do her an awful lot of justice with her face because it's a little bit on the wide side at the moment. So let's take a putty eraser and let's neaten that up a little bit. Probably just making it paler will help. And also, one of the other things that I do like to do when I'm trying to show movement, which is what this painting is all about, is rather than just sticking with that line drawing, I am also going to try to put a few extra marks in too, just with my pencil, so that it stops my drawing looking quite so stilted and hopefully starts to add to that freedom as if she's moving into a space. So let's get some of those lines in there. Again, it kind of breaks up that white and all of those kind of things. So I'm happy with my line drawing. I'm going to get started now on the painting part of it. So let's take you back to palette cam. Here I've got a few things that I need to set up before I do the background. I need a good pot of water. I need some kitchen roll, which I'm going to scrunch up to take the pattern out of it so that I don't get that in the background. And that is my security blanket. That is the thing I'm going to be clutching while I do the background. So I'm going to put that to one side. I'm also going to need my spray bottle because I want a soft edge to my background, a vignette. So I'm definitely going to need that. I'm going to need a largish brush. Again, this painting is not about the background, so all I'm doing at the moment is using a largish brush to get some of that colour in. This is a size 10. Now, sizes are only relative to the range that they are in, and so if you've got a size 10, it could be smaller than mine, it could be bigger than mine. But here it is in comparison to a pencil, which is pretty standard. So you can see it's a sort of Goldilocks principle really, and I'm going to talk more about the Goldilocks principle in just a second. It's not too small, it's not too big, it's just right. Now, over here on my ceramic palette, I have got my colours. Now I use tubed colour, and a minute ago you heard me talking about the Goldilocks principle. And the reason that I have my colours like this is because when I use tubed colour, so watercolour that comes in a tube like this, and I squeeze it out, I find that consistency to be too sticky, and it coats my brush in a way that I don't like. And also it means that if I squeeze out too much, I'm just wasting it. Now, alternatively to tubes, of course, you can buy pans ready-made. So those boxes that you get, we've got all those delicious colours all kind of baked into cakes ready to go. Now, I find that consistency of paint to actually be too dry. And so I scrub away at it, and I can't get enough colour off the surface. So I've come to a compromise with mine. I squeeze my colours directly out from a tube and into these empty pans. And then just before I start, I give it a bit of a spritz and the colour is ready to go. Now, just in case you're thinking to yourself, well, that's marvellous, Ali, but how on earth do you keep track of what all the colours are? If I hold it up to the camera, you can probably see I am the OCD painter that labels all of her colours. And it's got the name and the pigment number and all sorts of really geeky things that us watercolourists love. You can do it with a permanent marker as well. It doesn't have to be done with a fancy label. So there's my colours. I'm going to start with Cobalt Turquoise, but you may have a different colour and that's fine. And I think I'm all ready to go. So let's go back to that overhead shot. And here we've got Naomi all ready to explode onto the stage. And I'm going to put some soft turquoise into the background. Now, why turquoise? I'm using turquoise because it is a complementary. For those of you who've got a bit of colour theory knowledge, turquoise is going to be a nice complementary colour to the red and the yellow that's going on here. Those are going to be very warm, very bright colours. And so I wanted something a little bit cooler and a little bit fresher in the background so that she really pops off the page. And I'm going to start by giving the background a bit of a spritz. Now, I'm not spraying up to her. I'm creating a barrier between the edge of my paper and her. And so what I'm hoping will happen in a minute is that I will drop the colour in and it'll just diffuse into that background and do the thing it does best. The bit I don't want to forget about is this bit down here, which goes underneath her skirt, hopefully, when we are done. You can't paint this too wet, it's not possible. So spray more than you think you need and it will probably be about right. So let's just move my pot of water. Now, one of the other reasons that I like to use my colour in pans like this is so that I can hold the pan. I can feed that colour directly to my painting rather than going over to the side and delivering it in, which is a very long way when you're trying to paint quickly. So I can pick up that colour and I can drop it into the background. I can add water to it if I want to, but I'm very keen that everything at this point in time is all kind of sloshy and wishy-washy and wet and adds to that movement. So I can pick up colour from one place and transfer it elsewhere. I get that nice soft diffusion in the background. Need a bit more colour. The tricky bit is going to be underneath her hair. So rather than trying to work up into each one, I'm going to actually paint over the top of it a little bit, just in case I miss. Tracking my way around her hand, and then let's get in under her arm and using the point of my brush and trying to very neatly paint around her. If it goes over into her, don't worry about it. That's what our gouache and our bit of tweaking we're going to do later is for. So we've got that turquoise in at the top, and so we just need to put a little bit down here. I only want a little bit down here, just to frame her really. And let's encourage that to fall off the page too. Let's start as we mean to go on and really get some movement into this. I think also one thing that I am going to do, I've loaded my brush up with a little bit of colour and I'm going to tap a little bit of it on there too, just to give that kind of explosion. And then as soon as I am done with my brush, I wash it out, put my colour to one side, return to my kitchen roll, and then take care of any bits of this that I don't like or that I think are too wet and are going to affect it. So I can roll that tissue paper, you can see it's picking up some of the colour. I can even, if you've got a nice pale colour, I can knock some of it back where it's still wet. I can pick up anything, like I said, I've got a big old puddle going on down here. So I can pick that up I can roll this as well if I don't like any of this. I mean, actually, I've got so many lights shining at this morning that it's drying super fast. So my kitchen roll isn't really doing an awful lot. And what I should really do is leave that to dry. But what I'm actually going to do is speed it up a little bit with a hairdryer. So let me take you back to front on shot, and then you don't have to watch hairdryer going all over it. So while I do this, I'm just going to take 30 seconds out if you're okay with that. Please do pop any questions that you have about the materials or the demonstration, or ballet questions. I'll try to answer those too if I possibly can. While I just give this a quick bit of a blast. Just excuse me for 1 second. So while I'm doing this, I'm drying it on the front, and what I will also do is show you I don't stick my paper down, and one of the reasons for that is so that I can dry it on the back too. So we'll give it a good blast. Oh goodness me, now I'm warm. And ideally, if I was just doing this for myself, I would probably spend a lot more time drying it. I'd kind of leave it alone, I'd let it settle. But we're live here, folks, and that means I need to crack on with it. So I've got a background in. I need to work on Naomi herself now. So I am switching to a smaller brush. This is a size 6. Let me show you the size of this, and I'll show you it in comparison to the size 10 too. So you can see it's a little bit less than half of the size of the larger one. Leanne has just put, can we get the drawing you're using? Yes, Leanne, if you go, after this is over, if you go back onto the Search Press page, go to their events tab, and under the event you can see that the team have very kindly shared the source photograph and the line drawing too. And I'm sure if one of the team is there, and I think they may have done it further up the feed, has shared the link to it for you. So I hope that helps. So here is my size 6 brush. What's the question coming in? My lovely friend Ali, other Ali, ballet question. Did you get to see Gary Vadim and Stephen at all? Yes, there have been an awful lot of ballet programs on with some of my favourite dancers. And so I encourage you greatly to go and watch them, because dancers need our support at the moment with not being able to do it. Carol is asking, if I missed the beginning, will it be shown again? Yes, absolutely. And I know the Search Press team will share it because you can go back into their videos tab, click on it, and you'll see all of the Search Press authors who have very kindly been sharing some of their skills and techniques. So let's start on Naomi's hair. Let's get that in. So this is the burnt umber, and I'm going to put her hair in actually quite simple terms, because again, her hair isn't the star of the show today, her dress is. She'd hate me saying that. I must remember to forward this to her as well. So I'm using a blending out technique, and to do that I've popped in a little bit of colour, and then I've got a small amount of water on my brush, which I'm going to use to move that colour down into the areas of her hair that are important to me. Now, you don't have to stick too rigidly to it. You can interpret this, of course, if you don't want your dancer to have brown hair, you can do blonde hair, black hair, whatever you like. Naomi won't be offended, I can promise you that. So against her face, I want there to be a nice crisp line so that her face really stands out. But then towards her hairline and towards where her hair is attached to her head, I want it to be a little bit softer. So let's get that colour in. We can add a little bit more to that. Let's get a nice dark area in against her shoulder so that that really stands out. And use some blending out technique in there. So I've got a damp brush. It's not a wet brush, it's definitely damp. I'm trying my hardest to not faff about with it too much, but when you've got a small brush in your hand, it's excessively tempting. Let's get some of those bits in. I'm trying also to not turn this too much into a paint by numbers scenario. So I don't want to overwork it or overpaint it. I'm missing bits out. I'm using variations of water. I could just encourage that a little bit on the ends with the tip of my brush to fade out a little bit more. And again, we could use a small amount of spattering. Let's load that brush up with some colour. I'm going to use a pencil for my spattering this time. So knocking the brush over the top, and if I add a small, tiny amount up in this corner, hopefully that will break up the ends of that colour enough so that it's adding to that movement and it doesn't make her look like she's got measles. So that's her hair taken care of. I know I need to look at her shoe and all of those kind of things, but we'll get to that, don't worry. One of the things I definitely need to do, and I'm going to go against everything I have said to you so far. Let's take you back to palette cam. Here is my ceramic palette with turquoise on it already. And one of the main reasons that I have my colour into these pans is because I don't do an awful lot of colour mixing. As you've probably seen already, I pick up the colour from the pan and I put it straight onto the painting. But for this, I do need to thin that colour out a little bit because I want this colour for the shadows on her face and on her body and on her leg. And if I use it direct from the pan, this colour, which is called Jane's Grey, is going to be too strong. You can see straight away quite how rich a colour it is, and I want it to be very subtle. Now, Jane's Grey is an unusual colour. It is exclusive to Daniel Smith, but there are other ways of creating it. It is effectively ultramarine and burnt sienna mixed together, but you might have Payne's Grey, you might have translucent grey, you might have a black like lamp black or ivory black or lunar black, any of those kind of things, and they'll be fine. What you want is that soft version of whatever you're using. And you can see there as I thin it out what a blue, it's called a mass tone. So what it's sort of got a bias towards a bluey lilac, and that is why I like Jane's Grey. So you could, if you've got a black, you could always pop a little bit of blue in there or a little bit of purple just to soften it down ever so slightly. So let's go back to Naomi, and we're going to use some of that very thin colour to create some shadows. Now she needs a shadow on her head on the left hand side so that it gives her face a little bit more three-dimension. She definitely, I'm not sure that that's dark enough, but ho-hum, we'll come back to that. She definitely needs a shadow where her hair is crossing over onto her neck, so we can get that in too. So that's laying the colour down and using that damp brush to blend it out. She needs a shadow where the top of her costume meets her body. So putting that in hopefully throws the fabric forward a little bit. And then the same needs to be done over here where the bodice is, just underneath her armpit. So we'll get that shadow in on there too and blend it out. So you can see how that is starting to be formed now. This is starting to come forward a little bit, and she's looking a little bit more human. I'm running out of Jane's Grey, so just over on my palette, I've added a little bit more to it and some more water too. She needs a nice shadow underneath her chin. Maybe that's not dark enough, Ali. Underneath here, so that her face pops forwards. So we've got that little bit of grey. And whilst this might not seem like any kind of grand gestures comparing to what you have probably guessed is going to come with her skirt, we're doing it now so that we've got all of this detail being paid off by our explosion of colour that is coming. Caroline has sent me a message. Good morning Caroline. I'm really enjoying your book. It's great to put this demo into the picture and watch the techniques used. Thank you, Caroline. You are astonishingly welcome. The honour is all mine, believe me. It's very lovely being a new author to be able to share my techniques with you. It is the thing that I love to do the most. So using that Jane's Grey, we're getting that shadow in on her arm. Again, these are just gestural marks because it isn't so much about the figure, it's all about the dress. And I can't wait to share with you the techniques of the dress. Now, if you are painting and you're watching this on catch up via the videos tab, then you can put me on pause and you can do a lot more to this. I would probably be doing a lot more to it if I had more time. But I'm going to sort of skip forward a few processes so that we get to the good bit. One thing I definitely need to address is the depth of colour here on her hair. And I'm going to use a glazing technique for this. This is a traditional watercolour technique. So I've put the brown down for her hair. I'm now going to go over with a slightly stronger version of the Jane's Grey to put that shadow in so that we get a variation in the tone of her hair too. And then that way it looks a little bit more realistic. I suppose you would class this painting more like an illustration than any kind of traditional reproduction, but it's nice to get a shadow in there. I also need to get her shadow on her leg. Now, one of the reasons that I am a mixed media painter and not necessarily a watercolourist is because I like to change my mind about things. And every time I paint a picture, so obviously I've painted this piece before, but things always occur to me after the fact where I think, oh, do you know what, next time I'll do it like this, and next time I'll do it like that. And watercolour does have a little bit of a bad reputation for not being editable. And to a certain extent, that is correct. To a certain extent, you need to think carefully about where your lights and darks are. There are ways around that, but if you were working in very traditional watercolour techniques, you'd be building this up in lots of thin layers and until you've got the depth of colour. Now, I'm a mixed media painter because I want to put all sorts of other stuff on this and then go backwards to maybe doing a bit of her shoe or a bit more to her hair, all of those kind of things. So it gives me the opportunity to change my mind. Now her leg is in, got a shadow in. I'm not sure that that's dark enough. I'm not sure that any of my shadows are dark enough, but I need to get you to the good bit. But one thing first, I'm just going to turn my paper to about 45 degrees because I need to give her a surface to stand on. And that's still the Jane's Grey, but a lot stronger this time. And what I need to do is to put that shadow underneath the block of her shoe and run that colour across so that it gives her a surface to stand on, being very, very careful that these lines are horizontal. Now one of them's going uphill a little bit at the moment because I haven't got my glasses on. And I know they're on top of my head, but I'm being really lazy and trying to do this really speedily. So we'll get that colour in. And then hopefully what that does is ground her. Now I can see the things that I'm really unhappy with at the moment on my painting are things like up here. This is far too prominent a space, but I know that when I get the dress on, this is all going to go crackers. All of this colour is going to go really, really crazy. So I don't want to rush it because if you see, if I put my fingers over that, then she starts to look a lot better. Take my fingers away, big green blob. So it's very easy at this stage of the game to think to yourself, oh no, and panic and try to change it. But I'm going to try really hard not to. So let's take you back to palette cam. It's looking very tidy at the moment, actually. It's not like me at all. Now the next things I'm going to be using are these, which are my inks. And I've got a selection here. I've got two different types. I've got an acrylic ink and a shellac based ink, both of which are discussed in my book and explained in a bit more detail. Again, for this demonstration, it doesn't really matter which ones you've got, and it certainly doesn't matter if you haven't got inks and you're using liquid watercolour. My only suggestion would be that if you are using liquid watercolour, you need a lot of it. And potentially you do need a pipette on the top of it as well. This is one of the reasons I am using bottled ink today. But I'll show you lots of different techniques you can get for spreading it out. I've got a selection here. I've got a red, a very bright red. I think this is cadmium red, but I might be wrong. No, it's not. It's processed magenta. I lied. I've got Dr. Martens Bombay inks. That's a yellow and another magenta and violet here. And I might not use all of these, I might use some of these. I'm just going to see how I get on with this. So let's take you through the theory of what it is that we're going to do. We're going to paint this bodice in yellow. We're going to get that in and we're going to start to smudge with a brush a little bit of red up so that we get a nice gradation from the yellow of her bodice into the red of her dress. And then what we're going to do is we're going to make the colour very liquid and we're going to turn her again to about 45 degrees. Now I've got my board at a slight angle. You might want to lift yours up a little bit. We're going to run that colour down her legs, and then we're going to use that rubber dust blower to blow it down the page. And some of it's going to go crazy, some of it's going to be not crazy enough, but we're going to see what we get. So shall we start? I'm continuing to use my imitation sable brushes with these inks. That's probably not the best thing you can do, because if you do leave these to dry on your brush, the danger is that you won't be able to wash them out again. So perhaps older brushes might be more useful, but I know that I'm going to be fast enough to dip them in the ink, paint on and wash it out really quickly, so I should get away with it. So let's start with this beautiful rich Bombay ink in the yellow, and I'm just going to go straight into the pot for the time being, load up my brush with that colour, and then paint this part of her bodice in. So she's got a strap going over one shoulder and a strap going over the other shoulder, and then I can wash my brush out, add a little bit of water, and this part of the procedure, which you might not be able to see on camera, but I've got a big puddle down there, and that's going to be really important for the next bit, because I don't want that edge to dry out. So there's my yellow. What should we go for next? Let's go for the FW ink in the processed magenta, and let's just use it with a brush for the time being. If I dip it into the red and then I put it into that puddle, what I can then do with a bit extra water, let's get the kitchen roll involved too, is I can blend those two together much more easily, because I had that nice little puddle there, and we start to get those kind of fiery tones going on. Now this is the point, it's coming up folks, where I need to start encouraging this colour to go crazy. So I'm going to start loading it up with water. So this is really wet. I'm using the tip of my brush. This is the size 6 brush, and it's way too pale at the moment, but what you're doing is laying the groundwork for what's going to happen in a second. So I think I need to join those up a little bit more, but I'm loading it with water and water and water and water, and then I can get the dropper on my pipette and I can drop that colour in, and you can see straight away how it starts to run. And also to that, I'm going to use my brush to start smudging it back into that nice damp area that's above. So it's kind of controllable still at the moment, sort of. If you're hyperventilating at home, it's fine. I hyperventilate most days. Let's also, now do you know what we'll do? We'll blow that first. So we've got these big puddles going on, and here's my rubber dust blower. If you're doing this with a straw, you need to blow that way. So I'm letting gravity help me a little bit, and then you can see as soon as I use that rubber dust blower, it goes all over the place. How exciting is that? Very unpredictable, very scary, but it's fine. You're getting that movement, that explosion of colour. So while that's still wet, I'm going to go in with the Bombay, and now this is also a magenta colour, but I think if I remember correctly it's a little more pink. So I'm going to add some more to it. So it's running into the spaces that I'd already created. If you get a bit and you think, oh, I can't cope with that, use your kitchen roll, mop it up. It's fine. Don't worry about it. The whole point of this is that it's very experimental. Mick is saying, I haven't got a rubber puffer. Could I use a straw and blow to direct the colour ends? Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. Just a bit like blowing up balloons. Please don't keel over on me. I can do without the responsibility. So let's get that on. The puffer, Carol, you were asking where I got the puffer from. I actually purchased it from the SAA. That was where I got mine. And so it's all loaded up with colour now. It's running all over the place. It's so exciting. So I'm using my brush now. Oh, this bit, this is getting out of hand down here. Let's soak that up a little bit. I can do without that going any further. But I'm also going to show you an enormous cheat in a second for getting it back under control, because it's gone over her foot down here. But that's all right. Don't worry about it. I've managed to, look at me, honestly. I wasn't going to get out of this unscathed, was I? Let's get that colour on. And a bit more water, and let's give it another blast. I particularly need to blast these ones here. Don't need to blast you, you can get sucked up. But I do need to blast you. And I've got a bit of pink over here on the side. I doubt very much whether I'm going to be able to lift that out. That's all right, don't worry about it. And then I'm going to roll my kitchen roll into a point, and I'm going to take care of the really soggy bits, just temporarily. It actually looks like I've murdered somebody now, but that's all right. Let's take care of these. I don't like all of the patterns that I've made. I like some of them an awful lot. But this kind of experimental technique is never going to go super smooth. It's just not. You can't expect to throw colour at a piece of paper and it all go brilliantly. But the excitement of doing it is the payoff for me. And then the other colour that I'm going to add, just because I can, is I'm going to put a little bit of the purple in just for some shading here and there. And another thing that you can do, and I'm going to do for you now, is you can turn your brush the other way and actually use the handle of the brush to get them to go a bit further. Or of course, you can work back in with the tip of your brush if you're thinking, actually, I haven't got enough solid colour, and we'll get them working that way. So the difficult point of all of this is knowing when to stop. And of course, who knows when that is? Those who I teach on a regular basis will tell you that if I usually say to them, if you're asking, shall I stop? Then the answer is probably yes. Lovely, thank you. I think it's Monica in the background on the Search Press team today. So if you get the chance to say thank you to Monica, please do, because she's very kindly just put the link for the rubber dust blower on there. Thank you ever so much for doing that. It's very odd doing this remote teaching, you know, when somebody is there in the background, but you can't see them. It's all very peculiar. So let's get that colour going a bit further. Let's get it down. Now it's gone over her foot. Am I worried about that? Of course not. Of course not. We'll get that colour in. I'm loving this dark. Really loving this dark. Am I loving it because it's purple, I wonder? Possibly. Now to finish off, I'm going to get hold of the Processed Magenta FW ink that I had before. And of course I'm going to add some spatter because I need that movement to continue in the explosion of paint. So we will get that on. Now is the time to ask any questions, because I do need to give that a really good dry with the hairdryer. So I'm going to suck up the excess so that we're not sitting here for all eternity waiting for it to dry. And if you have any questions at all about the materials or the book or anything like that, stick them in the comments, and as I'm drying I will see them pop up. So let's give that a quick blast. I'll use my heat gun this time, I think, if it will reach. Yes, I think it will if I drop it down here. So do say hello, let us know where you're watching from, and just have a sip of coffee while I get some of this dried up. 2 seconds and I'll be right back with you. Righty-ho, righty-ho. Rosie is saying, will Milton work to bleach out a mistake? Brilliant question, Rosie. Fantastic. Unfortunately not, but it would do if you used Brusho instead of acrylic ink. You could definitely do that, but I'm going to show you an editing technique in just a second. Avril says, I have some liquid watercolours I was given as a gift. Would they work similarly to the inks? Yes, absolutely. Denise, with her leg where it is, wouldn't it be better if you did her leg before the magenta? I'm going to address that in just a second. People watching from Leicestershire, from Teesside. Fantastic. Thank you all so much for tuning in. It's a real buzz, has to be said. I've still got a blob down there. Never mind. Okay. Now, I could absolutely, Denise is absolutely right. I could have done her leg first. I can do it now. I could do it now and then still go back in and do more over the top. That's the joyful thing about mixed media. Laurie has said could always mask her leg off. Yes, absolutely. But actually, one of the reasons that I've left this is because I don't like that big pink blob. And this is a perfect opportunity to show you how gouache works and how you can do some really fantastic editing. So gouache, just in case you don't know, is like watercolour and like acrylic all at the same time. And it comes in two different whites. So you've got permanent white and you have got zinc white. Zinc white is for mixing if you want paler versions of things. Permanent white is if you want it to be really, really white. So it's the permanent white that I'm going to be doing today. And what I am going to do is I'm going to do a very, very sneaky, here's one I painted earlier moment, because I want to show you something very specific on the original. So here's the original that I painted. What's Mick put? Gloria's put, loving the movement of the dress makes me think of flamenco dresses, perhaps because I'm in Spain. Good morning, Gloria. Mick, if I hadn't seen this method in use, I'm sure I wouldn't have the courage to give it a go. What an amazing colour burst and so effective. That's very kind of you, Mick. Thank you very much. Now, on the original, you can probably see I took a bit of extra time over this one. I did a little bit more detail. The original is in the book, so if you do have the book, you'll be able to see this in close-up. Good morning, Joanne. Very lovely to see you. I know you and I have actually never met, but it's an honour to have you here. Thank you very much for tuning in. You may notice that here on the dress there are some white areas, and let me tell you, that is not the watercolour paper. And also up here, you may notice if you look very closely in the book, there's some white here too. Now all of that was done by going back in with the gouache afterwards and editing it, and that's exactly what I'm going to do for you now. Let's shove Naomi 1, Tarantella 1 over to one side, and then we've got number 2 here on the go. Let's take you back to palette cam. That's probably the best place to show you what I'm about to do. So I'm going to squeeze out the permanent white. I'm going to squeeze out quite a lot because I think I need quite a lot for this editing. And I should have some clean water, but I really haven't got any clean water. So I'm going to have to stick with the water that I've got, and I'm going to make it up to somewhere between, this is a much discussed version of things, single cream, double cream, Muller light yogurt, any of those things. What you want it to be is movable but not runny. That's the consistency that you're after. And if I take you back to that overhead shot, you will soon see how I know whether it's the right consistency or not, because I need it to cover over some of those areas. Now, one of the issues that I've got this morning is the fact that I have not given this enough time to dry. And so, therefore, I'm picking up some of the pink underneath. But that's all right. That's what live TV is all about, isn't it? That you get to see everything that goes on and you get to see everything that we do. But I'm going to edit that bit of the dress out. I may live to regret that, but who knows? And also, oh, what's going on there? Oh, okay. It needs a bit of grey. That's what it needs. Put some grey in with it, Ali. It'll all be fine. What could possibly go wrong? There we go. Getting that in. What I could do as well is I could put a little dab of white and blow that back into the dress if I wanted to. If there were some parts of it that I didn't like, I can cover them up with a bit of white too if I really wanted to. So again, very editable. I can do all sorts of things to it afterwards. What I'm trying so hard not to do is to faff about with it. What I want to get in is her leg and her shoe in particular. Now I think what I'm going to do to combat this issue down here, I'm going to make the shadow under her shoe much darker. So I'm going to do this with a few layers. So let's get, it's gone to a sort of pinky grey now, but I'm happy with that. Let's get that in and give that a dry. And let's give it a really good dry this time. And again, if I had more time, I might build that up a little bit further. I can reclaim the foot, which is bright, bright pink at the moment and could do with being a bit paler. I can reclaim that by putting white back in. And don't forget, you've still got a pencil to hand. You can always redraw elements back in if they've disappeared. And you could decide, you could make her shoe the same colour as her dress if you wanted to, or you could make it into ballet shoe colours. Now, if you do go back over onto my social media, and you'll see how I painted a point shoe earlier in the week, then you will be able to get an extra tutorial all about how I made up these point shoe colours. But you can do it whatever you like. You could do it in black, grey, whatever it is. Traditionally, point shoes are the same colour as the dancer's kind of tonal skin colour. I just happen to have these on my palette today. But like I said, you could give her purple shoes. You could give her a tiara. You could do all sorts of things with this. The decision is entirely yours. But I've got a little bit of ballet shoe gouache colour mixed up ready. So I can get that in and blend that out a little bit. And those kind of edits are there for another day. I have a feeling I'm going to want to tweak that a little bit more. I have a feeling that I'm going to want to mess about with it another time, just so that it's a bit neater and tidier. But today it's about sharing with you that kind of experimental explosion of colour and being able to edit it, because that's the thing I sort of feel most passionately about, really. Being able to edit stuff so that you're not crying in a corner somewhere because you have ruined your painting. Right, let's put a little bit more ballet shoe colour in. I am faffing now, big time. She needs a shadow on the back of her shoe, which I'm going to use the burnt umber for, to get that shadow in. Oh, do you think I need a new bit of kitchen roll? Should I treat myself to a new bit of kitchen roll? I think the time has come for a new bit of kitchen roll. And one last thing that I'm going to do for her, I'm going to put her facial features in with a bit more pressure on my pencil because they're not showing up as much as I would like. So a few little dots and dashes to get her face showing up a little bit more, because now in comparison to her dress, poor girl, it's a little bit pale. So we're getting those features in. I need a nice fine eraser going in there. That's better. That's better. And I can also use the pencil for adding some shading on her body too. So I can use that pencil in up and under various features in the crook of her arm, up in under her armpit. But for the purposes of this morning's experimental exercise, I am actually going to leave her alone. She definitely needs to dry very fully, and then I could go back in with all sorts of other things to tidy her up a little bit. So I'll leave her there just for a little while, so that you can just have a last few look at her before we say our goodbyes today. To recap very quickly, we drew her in, we put a background in the turquoise in a vignette style with a bit of spattering going on too. We did her hair in the brown, we looked at some greys to make the shading on her body, and then we kind of went for the star of the show. We went for those acrylic inks where we've got yellows and reds and oranges, and we used that kind of puffing, the blowing motion to get those elements of her skirt to create that feeling of exploding dance onto the stage. but also with a little bit of grace, which I know Naomi definitely has. So I do hope that you have enjoyed the demonstration today. Thank you very much for tuning in, if you have tuned in live. If you are watching via catch-up, thank you very much for your support. Like I said, if you do have any questions about anything, please do pop it in the comments, because I will go back and I will try to answer as many things as I can. But I know I've been watching. Monica, thank you so much for riding shotgun today, because I know that you've been answering as many as you possibly can. Stick with Search Press, because they've got lots of live demonstrations for you, and you can catch up with all of them, including this one, by going over to their main page and by clicking on the videos tab, and you'll see lots of things. I was having a look at them this morning, some really beautiful painting and some crafts, all sorts of different things on there, so do stick with them. If you are interested in more work from me, there is, I have lots of social media platforms, Facebook being my main one, Alison C Board Artist. But don't forget my book, A Beginner's Guide to Watercolour with Mixed Media, where I share so much more than you have seen this morning. Huge thanks to Search Press for hosting this and for supporting us artists during these unprecedented times. I do hope you've enjoyed it. Please do stay very safe, all of you, and I will see you very soon. Bye from Dorset. Take care.